The Blood of Zeus, an anime about Greek mythology created by the same studio responsible for Castlevania. That was the coolest thing I've ever said, and somehow the show turned out to be the most meh thing I've seen all year. It's not engaging enough for a summary, nor is it bad enough to warrant anything more than a moderately annoyed Twitter post. I could not make a video about it. But it's a Netflix cartoon and Apollo looks like this. It would have been a sin for my brand not to talk about it. Thankfully, as I was teetering between a video about violence against women or why it's okay to change the mythology, I realized something. This show has like 5 women in it, 4 of them are moms, and none of the moms make it through to the end of the season without being maimed or killed. And I'm like, why? Why is this a thing? Why is motherhood the second deadliest job in media after mentorships? What does it say about us that we keep doing the same trope? So I decided to make a new series where I talk about shows that have toxic tropes in them and explore the subject in further depth. Wait, this feels very familiar. Guys, I swear I'm not doing this intentionally. Oh, I'm screwed. For all of you living under a rock, moms are kind of a big deal. They're single-handedly responsible for keeping the human race alive, with their reward being the ungrateful byproduct, radically changing their lives. Now, while mom isn't needed to raise a child, gotta just nip this argument in the bud here, the idea of having a benevolent caretaker is one that has almost universally been coded as female. Cis white guy talking here, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Most media tilt basically now, portrays married couples as the breadwinning man and the domestic wife, one being off at work, leaving the kids and everything else to the mom. There was some precedent for this back in the day where women weren't allowed to work, and even before that when the whole family contributed in the labor. But even then, it was still expected that the mom would play a bigger part in their children's lives than the husband. Regardless of how accurate this model is, it still reflects something that many of us experience in real life, being dependent on someone else in our developing years. We see these figures as our everything. Most of us couldn't tie our shoes, let alone cook or get anywhere intentionally. This dependency allows us to form a positive association with our caretakers. And if any of you have a dog, you know then that whoever helps the puppy out the most gets the most love, which is the same thing with people. Storytellers took this idea and just ran with it, saying that moms must take care of us the most, so we must love them the most. But as strong as that love is, this borderline parasitic relationship has to be broken eventually. You gotta learn how to do things on your own. But leaving your parents for the first time, it's hard, but it's essential to establishing your independence and learning how to take care of yourself. Which is why so many stories start with dead or about to be dead mother figures, and why they're almost always coming of age tales. Because nothing says grow up like having to take care of yourself, that and watching your favorite person die. Because trauma! When subtlety is dead, just use blunt force. This is The Land Before Time. Littlefoot loses mom and has to make the journey on his own. This is Bambi. Hell, 80% of kids' movies are about this. And God, don't even get me started on Disney, but look, I'm just trying to say that losing a parent to grow up is a widespread trope. It harkens to our real-world experience, but just because it's done often doesn't mean it's done well. And it definitely doesn't mean that we should keep doing it. Which brings us to the cartoon of the hour, Blood of Zeus. What if Greek mythology, but written by the authors of Netflix's Death Note? Yeah, I was surprised too. And it's exactly what you'd expect. Blood of Zeus is a Netflix animated series produced by Powerhouse Studios. You might recognize them for their strikingly dark Castlevania adaptation, which is famous for its stellar writing, bloody action scenes, and a more anime-style approach than other Western productions. Blood of Zeus lifted a lot of its elements from the Castlevania show, but missed the one that mattered. This is more of a paint-by-numbers fantasy action show with Greek mythology. It has great character designs, don't let anyone say it doesn't, but it's more Star Wars than Castlevania, and if you thought Star Wars had generic characters, oh boy, you're gonna like this one. Because this story starts with our main hero, Heron, Zeus's son whose mother Electra was raped by Zeus. Yes, raped. Not mincing words about what it is. I don't care how romantic the show tries to play it, it is rape. See, Zeus saw Electra bathing one day while chilling on a branch pretending to be an eagle, typical predator stuff, deciding he had to have her, transforming into her abusive husband, being nice to her so they could bang. This is all garnished though, as she really doesn't have a say in any of it. Eventually, she puts two and together that her husband isn't Two-Face and makes Zeus reveal himself. She's shocked for about 30 seconds before deciding she's into this. Also, she's preggers with twins. One is her husband's, the other one is Zeus's. A very miffed Hera fulfills her contractual hate the woman and child because of what her husband did thing, warning the king that his wife is cheating and one of the kids isn't his. The kids are born, and in the only historically accurate part of the show, a very ticked husband tries to kill wee baby Heron. Zeus intervenes, Electra kills her husband, and Zeus takes them both away, leaving Heron's human brother to his evil uncle, who drops him off a cliff faster than he can say consent. The poor kid only gets saved thanks to the timely intervention of his mother's midwife, who gets found out by the evil uncle and has to raise the kid in the woods. Meanwhile, Heron and Electra aren't doing much better, with Zeus ordering them to stay in a remote Greek town, which he conveniently covers in fog to hide them from a still very angry Hera. Years go by, and Heron goes from a baby to Hercules, hated by everyone, but they get by thanks to the occasional help of a kindly old drunkard, who is Zeus in disguise. Things go south when demons, yes, demons. They're humans corrupted by eating giant flesh. They did the exact same thing in Seis Manos. These demons attack the town, and their leader, anime character Seraphim, kills Heron's mother after some unwanted divine intervention from Hera, who's a little bit peeved from finding out her husband had been seeing Electra still, and others. Heron is heartbroken and begins his revenge quest. So this is a pretty typical story setup. The hero refuses to leave home, inciting incident happens, and the parental figure gets capped, removing the option for the hero to stick around. If this was it, I wouldn't be making this video. But the matricide doesn't stop there, because it turns out Seraphim is Heron's brother, who, get this, also lost his adopted mother when his evil uncle tracked them down, with her sister dying for extra good measure. In this being ancient Greece, she's guaranteed to also have kids. So of the 5 female characters we've met so far, 3 of them are dead, and we're not even done because Alexia, just think Samus, but less personality, also lost her mother. 4 moms. Okay, I know it's really 3, but let me just say 4. 4 dead moms in one show. The only mom who doesn't die is the bad guy Hera, who only gets maimed, leaving the mandatory no-homo love interest Alexia. Guys, this is ancient Greece, it's gay as fuck, just let it happen. As the only speaking female to not have something horrible happen to them. What the fuck is this bullshit? Now, I'm not saying killing mothers in stories is always a bad thing. It just almost always is. But when a story has enough dead mothers to call bingo, I start to question, what the Hades is going on here? If you just have Heron and Seraphim with dead moms, that creates narrative symmetry between them. A common point they share, and we learn more about them based on how they react to it. With both going into homicidal rages, with Heron learning to let go of his anger and to not kill his brother. For that reason, he kills him for something entirely different. Seraphim, in contrast, was consumed by his rage, with no amount of revenge being able to heal the emotional pain he felt from that trauma. He turns his life into a perpetual revenge quest, desperate to give his life purpose. There's a definite narrative reason for these 2 characters to lose their mothers, and with this being Greek mythology, they weren't about to get rid of Zeus. Yet. But then they keep doing it, for no reason than to give characters angst. Alexia was in the underworld, where you're supposed to find your greatest fears and insecurities. Alexia sees her mother, and through another illusion of her father, finds out that he blames her for the mom's death, because of course he did. She can't be a tough, driven woman who decided to be a warrior. No, all of her inner badassness comes from the fact that her mom died and her dad hated her. Of course. It was so obvious. Just ignore the fact she's an Amazonian. You know, that mythical group of warrior women famous for just being warriors? Well, that doesn't matter. Dead mom is what they really want you to focus on. Heron and Seraphim are already badasses before figuring out how to use their powers, but for Alexia there has to be a reason. Because they can have Star Wars knockoffs in this show with no questions asked, but you have a woman wears armor and suddenly the show feels compelled to justify her existence, making what could have been a driven badass warrior into a paper tiger you've already forgotten about. Alexia, having a dead mom backstory, exists solely to give an already flaccid character to create the illusion of depth, which is an obvious tell for the lazy use of the dead mom trope. But this minor rage aneurysm did get me to reflect on the trope itself, and made me realize that this isn't unique. This is something that has been continually happening. You have a character that you don't know what to do with, so you kill the mom and call it interesting. There's no other point than that. And I really wish they would stop doing it. But it doesn't stop there. Just thinking about this trope and what it says about us as a culture, it doesn't just reflect poorly on women, because it reflects very interestingly on fatherhood as well. Now, while I can't speak for women's status in all of history, I only have a minor in it after all, weird flex I know, the last 200 years for women's rights has been what experts would like to call terrible. From being treated like property to being property, it has been a constant uphill battle to make the situation better. The effect of this historical lack of personhood is that in fiction, there is an all too common default to portraying women as objects, not characters. The princess, the reward for slaying the dragon, the evil witch out to kick all the puppies, the mom. In these stories, it's all about what they represent. This then leads to the worst part of all of this, the loss of identity. Because if you look at these characters, you'll find plenty of essays about what they represent, with very, very little on why they're doing this, with the default answer being depressingly simplistic. It's because they're blank. Why does Electra sacrifice everything to save Heron? Because she's a mom. That's what moms do. Except they don't. Not all of them. There is no universal what one person would do based on their role. But stories will just assume this is the reason enough to hold a plot together, long enough till the character in question is killed off. But what people tend to forget is that being a mom isn't an identity. It's only part of who you are. If you want a great example of this, check out Emily in Close Enough. She's a millennial mom who has to balance raising her very, very high energy daughter while still finding herself and figuring out what it means to be an adult. Being a mom is an integral part of who she is, but it's not all she is. Now compare this to Electra, who has nothing outside of her son. Her only characteristics are being in love with Zeus, loving Heron, and being scared that Hera will kill all of them if she gets the chance. This is the exact problem when you go through all the dead mom victims. Unless they're an integral part of the show, they rarely get an identity outside of the mom. You can apply this rule to almost every role for women, and it usually plays out from the femme fatale to the precocious child. We don't know anything about them outside of their role. Blood of Zeus does a lousy job with all of its characters, but the women really get hit the worst. With only one goddess getting a speaking role, the rest of the cast is a sausage fest. Finding deep characters is hard in this show, but you can give up if you want a character without a certain set of genitalia. Women are just in this story. The men get to be characters, bringing us to Zeus. Sadly, the character with the most going on, with his story being all about fatherhood, with him trying to figure out what it means to be a father. Is this surprising that women get capped and dads get to figure out what being a father means? It's not. So Zeus in this story, it's kind of a piece of shit. Now, all the gods in this show are pretty shitty, but I have a special beef with Zeus because, while being equally shitty, if not more so than Hera, this show goes out of its way to present him in a positive light, rape and all. See, Zeus has a problem. Despite an amphitheater worth of bastard children, he doesn't know how to be a dad. See, he killed his father, leaving him with no reference for how to be one. And he says this with a straight face after spending years helping his son out in disguise and flat out ignoring all the other bastard children hanging around Olympus. But maybe it's okay. Maybe there's reasons for this. Maybe he just doesn't get it. It doesn't come naturally to him, like a certain gender. Yes, that is very much what this show implies. Zeus's whole arc is about him learning how to be a dad. This experience made him a better man and allowed him to recognize his past mistakes. If you'd like to see an example of this done better, check out any of the video games in the Dadification of Games article. All these characters get a better story than Zeus. But they can all be summed up like this. Being a dad is hard, it doesn't come naturally, it's just a part of who you are, and it makes you a better person. Compare that to motherhood, where it's portrayed as easy, comes naturally, defines who you are, and gets you killed. Not a very even divide, is it? It presents men as having more complex characters, one that may be open to flaws and capable of change. Society doesn't present fatherhood as being the totality of male existence. Child rearing is the mom's job. So the dads are obviously going to struggle filling in that role. That's why we make such a big show of single fathers succeeding in film. And as a child, semi-successfully raised by a mom and dad, this idea that dads aren't involved in raising their kids is incredibly insulting. It basically says that dads have no input or interest in their child's lives outside of discipline and paying the bills. Women get shafted by being presented as objects, defined by what, rather than who they are, while men get treated as actual characters. They are almost always portrayed as distant, uncaring individuals, more tied up in reinforcing their own masculinity than helping others. Neither of these are good, and I think we can all recognize that they do more harm than good. It's seeing these tropes played so straight that really turned me off of Blood of Zeus. Just because something is rooted in bad history doesn't mean that it can't be used or done really well. With shows like Steven Universe being very much centered around a dead mother, who at first glance is the pinnacle of perfection and fits neatly into the too good for this sinful earth persona, it's steadily revealed throughout the show that her real personality was way more complicated, with far more significant implications than just being the dead mom who gives everyone feels. And transformative fatherhood doesn't have to be a bad thing. We can thank it for making Kratos a guy who just screamed rage and testosterone into an actually compelling character, whose withdrawn attitude is damaging to his relationships. A story isn't bad because they have certain tropes in them. We have to recognize that certain tropes negatively affect the real world. If you want a perfect example of this, take a look at Disney. The number of stories centered around father-child connections make up about half their roster. The number of stories non-evil moms connecting with their kids, you can count on one hand. And that's really bad. It deprives us of great stories. There's so many stories that could be told, and we are getting none of it. It's this lack of mainstream content that really makes the dead mother trope toxic. It deprives us of characters and relationships that aren't often seen, perpetuating a lazy writer's ability to avoid adding depth to characters, believing it's fine if it's just them, even as everyone does it, as people watch it and learn from it. The dead mother trope is the metaphorical tip of the iceberg for the betrayal of women in media, something we point and laugh at while ignoring the systemic problems beneath it. And women don't deserve that. No one deserves that. And I think it's time we should all recognize that. Thank you all for watching. This has been Sarcastic Chorus. Let me know in the comments if I should continue doing this series, not in the views. But thank you all for watching. Do all the usual like, subscribe, the notifications, all that other usual bullshit. But please, have a good one, and please, don't kill the mom in your story.